Hi, I'm Elaine. Ooh, it's windy. I'm Elaine. This is Elena's XYZ, and I'm coming at you from the oldest place I can find because I am feeling very, very old. Well, actually, not really. This place is so old that it kind of puts all aging into perspective. In a couple of days, I am going to be going into my big 4-0, which sure feels like something. 39 has felt like kind of an anomalous year for me. So many different aspects of how I had been living my 30s changed really unexpectedly. And I guess to bring some normalcy back into my life, I planned a birthday activity that felt more in line with what had been my norm, which is travel, mostly by myself. And since I'm entering the Middle Ages, what better place to kind of kick off this video than the most famous place from the Middle Ages, Canterbury. Of ye Canterbury tales. Anyway, I'm speaking to you from these travels because I figured that for this milestone, considering the general age range of people who are actually vlogging on here, I ought to mommy a little bit, act the wise crone, have a heart to parasocial heart with all of you here on YouTube about what I've learned now that I have existed through what would be considered the halfway point of a very enviable lifespan. God, I hope this is just the halfway point. But if I were to contrast what my 20s were like versus what my 30s were like, now that I have those 2 decades to compare, I would say that my 20s were spent learning a bunch of rules about how the adult world and general society worked. It didn't really matter if it worked for me. I was still just careening around inside it, trying to figure out what the boundaries of acceptable social existence were. And then my 30s were spent interrogating those rules and unlearning a lot of the habits that my 20s had imprinted into me. And so I thought it would be kind of fun to share some of those things I've unlearned. But the first thing I actually need to do is check out of this hotel. So 1 second. And then the entire year passed by and I never finished this video. Amazing. It turns out that when you're a bit of an overthinker, it becomes really, really hard to put something out there when there's even a whiff of a chance that it sounds like a platitude. And well, my first selection of advice I wanted to give felt pretty solid to me at first, but as I continued to edit this video, I kept on thinking, oof, can I really stand by this? Is a document where I say things like, don't get hung up on roadmaps and age ain't nothing but a number, really useful to anyone? Or even to me? And then the year continued to happen. And it was personally probably the most confusing and humbling year I've had in my adult life. Nothing quite worked out like I felt it was supposed to. Not in my career, in which every tactic that had gotten me a new job before bore absolutely no fruit, leaving me with dwindling savings and, oh, beautiful country that I'm in, no healthcare. Not in hobbies like this vlogging thing, in which all the free time I had allocated to them was sucked up into the hole of my depression as my meds ran out and, oh yeah, having health insurance is kind of important to keep those things going, huh? Not in my relationship, which was a lot of realizing how much past trauma gets tilled up when you choose to embrace vulnerability and live with someone again. And that sure is hard to process alone without affordable mental health services. And also, well, perhaps I'm too sensitive a soul, but it was really hard to maintain the tongue-in-cheek tone this video was originally supposed to have alongside the train wreck of a year on the whole. Maybe saying this year felt weird is an understatement, but I don't know how else to describe going to brunch and making friends and carrying on with regular life while your country's government is torn apart at an alarming speed. when it's completely upending the world order in an overwhelmingly chaotic way, and when it's actively and blatantly gaslighting a genocide. Not to mention all the regular anxieties around things like other major human suffering events, increasingly erratic weather due to climate change, etc., etc., etc. So maybe halfway through the year, I realized I couldn't divorce myself from my context and decided to just wait on it. Maybe some wisdom would churn up through the sea of turmoil and present itself. And now it's August again, and I'm about to have lived out this entire 40th year, and I think I'm maybe finally ready with one piece of advice for all of you that's also a good reminder to myself. And it's a phrase I've found myself repeating almost enough to be a mantra. Be careful about what kind of stories you're telling yourself. They shape the entire world. And I mean this in a sense of interrogating terms that you say are important to you and very clearly understanding what they actually entail. I feel like the cycle of useful therapy or activism terms becoming buzzwords has sped up recently, and we're served so many feel-good memes on things like, for instance, self-care and setting boundaries and building community, that sometimes we repeat them without really thinking about what self-care is supposed to heal, or about what a boundary actually is for, or what kinds of community need to be built. When we rely on our gut feelings for those, we tend to go towards what's the most comfortable for ourselves, but only focusing on getting back to comfort for ourselves is, well, an invitation to narcissism, and that ironically probably turns you into the people that other people need to self-care and set boundaries and build community against. I think one of the hardest things I've navigated most recently has been figuring out what of the boundaries I've been setting are legitimate needs for my sanity and what ones I've put into place because I feel much more comfortable alone than ever having to rely on anybody. Trying to wrestle some sense from the contradictory feelings of knowing that anything that makes my life worthwhile requires giving my space and time to people, while also just being very easily annoyed by being around people. I don't know. Life's hard for an introvert with any kind of ambition, I guess. Granted, if you do understand all that and have decided your own comfort is in fact what you're going to prioritize, well, I guess at least be clear-eyed about it. The only chance anyone has of you not being the problem starts with you recognizing you are the problem. And so I truly hope we all do enough self-reflection to be less of a problem. Be careful about what kind of stories you're telling yourself. They shape the entire world. I mean this in a sense of the stories you choose to consume or create. What you fill your head with becomes what you think the world can be. The writer Ursula K. Le Guin once asked us all to write more speculative fiction that showed worlds without oligarchs, because the key to finding a way out of the imperfect system we're currently in is imagining ourselves in someplace better.
We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings.
And I wonder sometimes, when looking at the neoliberal techno-fascism that's taken a hold of us, if even good cyberpunk books that were supposed to be warnings against mega-capitalism ended up becoming real because they painted such a vivid picture of what the dystopia could be, made that future seem almost inevitable. Even with nonfiction or the news cycle too, though, spending time dwelling on danger ends up making the entire world seem more dangerous and hopeless than it actually is. And I think we've seen again and again that when people think the world is more dangerous and hopeless than it actually is, they begin advocating for very bad policies to make themselves feel safe. I know that when I doom scroll too much, or if I read too many articles in a row about things that are breaking, I lose the will to do anything about it. In comparison, when I do read about how much time and effort it took to, say, get women's suffrage or the Civil Rights Act or the 40-hour work week passed, it helps me put into perspective that there's something out there worth planting, even if you don't get to see the fruits of your labor in the end. So keep your eye on that potential fruit. And while you're at it, feed yourself the stuff that will help you imagine a better fruit, one that's not rotten. Be careful about what kind of stories you're telling yourself. They shape the entire world. I mean this in fixating too hard on the way you feel things should be. How much of a life bucket list of success or fame or love you should have ticked off by now. How your relationships should be treating you. How many problems in the world we shouldn't have to deal with anymore. Unless you're truly born under a lucky star, life will bring a string of disappointments. You're not going to win at everything you try at. Your people will let you down. You will realize that, no matter what Obama said, the long arm of history is not an inevitable curve towards justice. Every time another disappointment knocks you off your feet or regrets slide into your pre-sleep brain in the middle of the night, how do you deal with it? I admittedly have a tendency to marinate in shoulds. I have a tendency to feel indignant and to then spend hours listing the justifications for feeling indignant, and to then be paralyzed into inaction and depression by the fact that no matter how justified my indignancy is, there is no way to erase what caused it. And wow, that is a really big waste of your time. I'm not saying you can't feel upset or regretful or worried about where you're at all. I recognize that those are all extremely natural reactions and good markers by which to course correct, but you do need to course correct. Swimming in the waters of how things should be for too long will just poison yourself with resentment. At some point, when you've caught yourself spending time in the shoulds, maybe it's time to move on to the ises and the coulds. How is the situation right now, actually? How could it possibly still get better? And in that respect, what story am I telling myself of what happened the last year and what I'm doing now? Do I stew on how little money I made, how much more local and routine my life became, how many days I wasted unable to get out of bed, brain foggy, and in general not functioning at the level that I wanted to? Or do I acknowledge that somewhere in the muck of all of that, I was there for my family when my family needed me, for both happy occasions and for health crises? I spent a lot of time volunteering and hosting awesome get-togethers, and I made a bunch of new New York friends, which is actually a pretty difficult task when you're a middle-aged adult like me. I applied to and got into a master's program in climate change. Yeah, I am going back to school at 40 years old. Instead of focusing on all the disappointment, can I tell myself that even when I wasn't crystallizing life lessons into an easy video, I was still taking steps towards my truth? And my truth is that I don't want to just doom scroll and stew in resentment at the state of the world right now. That I instead want to throw myself into finding out what I can do to make my world better. And all of that despite watching it march in the wrong direction every day. Even when I was in the throes of feeling upset and overwhelmingly cynical, I somehow defaulted towards optimism. Can I now go into the rest of my life with that as a guiding light so that when things get dark, as they inevitably will, I can trust myself to work through it? That for the long arm of history to bend towards any kind of justice, we all need to trust ourselves enough to work through it. Be careful what stories you're telling yourself. They shape your entire world. So I'm not very good at conclusions, but hey, a conclusion wouldn't be good for a midlife birthday post anyways. So instead, what's up? Could you tell this was AI? When I began to make this video last year, I tried to streamline the filming and editing process using HeyGen, this talking head avatar creator, and I made an avatar of myself just a few days before my birthday. Yes, AI is kind of scary, but the cat's kind of out of the bag, so I guess I might as well figure out how to actually use it. I don't really know who else would watch this and get something from it, but it does feel somehow fitting that even if it's just me reviewing this video years from now for a reminder of what I thought would be some words of wisdom, I'm being told all of it by a version of me frozen in time at 39 and 360-ish days old.